Hiring anybody is a huge risk that both the company and that manager needs to take. So in the short time that you have together in the interview, you need to be able to convince them that you're worth taking that risk. In this video, I'm going to talk about 7 things that you need to do in every interview to get the job. Which of these are you already doing, and which of these are you not? Let's jump in and find out. Know the difference between being concise and providing too little information, but no matter what, make sure that you do not ramble. If you aren't able to keep your answers concise, your interviewer might zone out, forget what you're talking about, and you might even fail the interview before you even get started. If you need more than 3 sentences to tell the story, find a better way and a more efficient way to tell the story or the example that you're providing. You don't need to provide every single detail when you tell your stories, just enough to get the important parts across. Honestly, most people won't even care about the full details of the story. They just need to know enough to understand what you're talking about and to understand the context in which the story you're telling takes place in. On the other hand, if you provide too little information, people are going to have no idea what you're talking about. So make sure you find that healthy medium and stick to that. Think about it this way. The first question that most people are going to start the interview with is, tell me a bit about yourself. If you go on for 15 minutes about how you like collecting World War II era stamps and you go fishing with your buddy Pete on the weekends, chances are the interviewee has already lost interest and they're not going to pay attention to a single thing that you say afterwards. Number 2, show that you really know the business. I'm not talking about doing a Google search or going on their website's about page and doing some basic stuff, but show that you went that step past that, went deeper, did some of the deep research that's really needed to show that you care and are passionate about this business. If you're interviewing for them, are you a customer? Do you know customers? Have you spoken to any of those customers? What are some of the lessons learned that you can pull from those conversations? Is there some feedback that you can provide about the business? Are there any questions that come to mind as someone who's used your product? Show that you really care and that you're genuinely interested in this position as well as the company. How familiar are you with the space? Is this something that you're interested in, something that you can talk a bit more about outside of just the context of the company? So as an example, if you're interviewing at Netflix, obviously it's important to talk about movies and TV shows and other things that might be really popular at the time. But can you go past that? Are you able to talk about games, how they handle customer interactions, different trends in the streaming industry, different things that you see 4, 5, 10 years down the line? Bringing examples like that to your answer are really going to show that you're a step above the other competition and that you truly deserve the job. I think back to my experience as a college student. I was interviewing at a really big TV network, and not only did I miss my first interview, but in the second interview that they actually gave me a chance with, she asked me what was my favorite show on that TV station, and I had no idea what to say. Obviously, I didn't get a call back after that, but that just goes to show you, even if you're qualified for the job, not that I was, but even if you're qualified for the job, if you can't talk about why you're passionate or why you're interested in working at this particular company, that might be a bad mark on your record. Number 3, show that you made an effort before you went to the interview. Say you're interviewing at a Macy's or some other department store. Go to one of those stores that's in your area, take some pictures, make some observations about what you're seeing. Are there any other things that you would do differently? Maybe the merchandising, the types of stuff that's being displayed in the front. How would you boost sales? What are some things that you can potentially tap into to leverage for Macy's as well? What is something that Macy's might be doing better than Nordstrom? What's Nordstrom doing better than Macy's? It's really important to show that you did some of this extra legwork before the interview, and bringing those examples into the way that you provide your answers are only going to make you stand out. Even if you aren't necessarily applying to a customer service position, try calling the customer support line to see what it's like to speak with those agents. Were they people that are onshore? Were they people offshore? Do they have a 24-hour customer support? Do they send emails? Do they have good follow-ups? Show that you interacted with the company even if you're not necessarily a customer, and that'll show you that you're not just applying to a single job, but you're bringing your expertise and your knowledge to the job itself. It's especially helpful if you're an actual customer, or maybe one of your friends or a family member is a customer of that particular company. Be the voice of the customer. Talk about what the customers want, what the customers are saying. Check out their subreddit if they have one. Check out Facebook groups, other fan pages, forums, blogs, whatever the case might be, and bring some of that knowledge to the interview. I guarantee, depending on the role, especially if it's something like a marketing role, that those people are already going to be familiar with what the customers are saying. So you proving that you did some of that additional research is only going to be extra impressive. I will say, don't fake being a customer or lie about using a product if you actually have it. It's okay to not necessarily be a customer, or to not be super familiar and hands-on with the product itself, but by doing some of that additional research that we just talked about, It shows that even if you're maybe not necessarily a customer, that you still have the right knowledge and curiosity to prove that you're still a valuable asset to this potential company. When interviewing, bring some personality to the table. No one wants to interview or hire or work with a robot. So it's okay to crack a joke, have some good small talk, a nice conversation before or after the interview. Show this person who you really are outside of this professional formal setting. Obviously, when we're at an interview, we have to follow a particular professional decorum, and there is still sort of that script and a give and take type relationship that's going to be at play. But it's okay to allow some of your true self to shine through. If anything, on top of all the advice that we talk about and all the other advice that you know about interviewing, what's most important is that you bring your flavor to your answers, to your personality, how you're coming across to the interviewer. Obviously, your answers are going to be super important, and the things that you say and talk about are really going to be what drives the ultimate decision. There's a lot of these soft skills, a lot of things that you can't necessarily vocalize or verbalize. That's also super important. What's your demeanor? Do you make the person feel comfortable? Do you seem comfortable? Are you confident? Do you have a professional appearance? All those things truly do add up. The day of the interview is going to be stressful no matter what. Don't worry about it if you slip up a little bit. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone's going to mess up or slip up in an interview. Just make sure to collect yourself, calm down, and then restart. Say you're providing an example, you lose your train of thought. Make a joke about it. Be like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I was so nervous. Let me start again. That's a lot better than somebody pretending like it never happened or ignoring it or being really weird about it. So once again, just be yourself. It's okay to make mistakes. We're all human. Everyone understands that. So while it may be really difficult, try to remain calm. At the end of the day, the interview is something that helps bring your resume to life. You can have an awesome resume, but if you're not able to back that up when it comes to a physical interaction and conversation with the person, it really doesn't matter. You might have a 4.0 GPA, have graduated honors, have worked at some awesome companies in the past, but if you're just not a good fit for the company, chances are they might not hire you. Obviously, if it's a part of your personality that just doesn't vibe with the company, there's only so much that you can do. You can't really fake it, and also it's really not worth faking it. But if this is a job that you're really enthusiastic about and something that you truly care about, try to bring that enthusiasm to the table in the way that you answer, in the way that you interact with others, in the way that you present yourself, and it'll really shine through. You don't want to be one of those people who are overly enthusiastic or way too cheery for the situation, because that just comes off weird, honestly. But my best advice is be genuine. If you're not enthusiastic about the job, maybe it's not the job for you. If you are enthusiastic about the job, show that you do care, and I'm sure the interviewer will also pick up on that. When it comes to videos like these and other advice columns that talk about interviewing, something that really isn't focused on that I've noticed is a lot of the soft skills. Sometimes the general vibe that you give off plays a huge role, whether people know about it or not. We all have a subconscious, and sometimes that subconscious picks up on different cues or different things that just make you feel a certain way about a particular candidate or a person that you interact with. Say you're talking to somebody and your body language is just giving off super nervous vibes. You know, you're rubbing your hands, you're sweating, you just feel uncomfortable, you seem uncomfortable. Is that someone that you want to work with at the end of the day? They might be qualified, but there might be that part of you when making that decision. Once again, whether you know it or not, that just feels a little hesitant about moving forward. On the other hand, say someone who is maybe 90 or 80% of that candidate when it comes to credentials makes you feel comfortable. You can tell that they're organized, that they feel comfortable in their skin. They allow others around them to feel comfortable. I think that also goes a long way. Whether or not that's right, I can't really say. Some of those non-tangibles do ultimately separate you from the pack. As someone who does find social interaction sometimes nerve-wracking, and as someone who does have some anxiety when it comes to that kind of stuff, I know it's really difficult. You can't really change who you are as a person, and I'm not saying that you should, but understanding how to control your emotions, understanding how to calm yourself, how to let your true self shine despite all those challenges that you might face is really important and something that I find is helpful not just professionally, but just in general in life. When it comes to interviewing, you never want to change who you are or portray a part of you that's really not authentic. And that's not what I'm saying you have to do. But when it comes to talking to somebody, interacting with someone in a professional setting, those things don't necessarily have to be a barrier to you being a confident person, to someone who feels confident in their abilities and communicating with others and just generally being and giving off good vibes. Everyone knows a classic interview question. Tell me about one of your weaknesses. The classic way to answer that question is to talk about a strength or a good characteristic and try to package it up as a weakness, right? We all know that trick. I think that glosses over the fact that sometimes it's okay to show that you do have weaknesses. We all know that we're not perfect and that no one's going to hit absolutely 100% of all the criteria that you might have for a particular applicant. And I think it's time that we embrace some of those weaknesses sometimes. Obviously, you don't want to flaunt your weaknesses or highlight them or make that the primary thing that you want to talk about, but it's okay to admit that you don't know something or that you've made a mistake. Honestly, when I'm interviewing people who are able to do that in a good way, people who are able to weave some of that into their answers, I'm more impressed by than someone who tries to come off as perfect and as someone who never makes a mistake. As an example, maybe you're talking about a situation where you didn't know the answer. You didn't have a playbook. So what did you do? You did the due diligence, you looked at some options, you weighed the pros and cons, you prioritized the different potential solutions, and you took action. Maybe that situation, it didn't work out to the best of your advantage and it wasn't the right thing to do. It shows that you had a thought process as to why you made that decision and that you're someone who can do your own research. People are hiring you to do a job, not so that they can handhold you and ask you to do every single thing individually. If you just go straight to your boss or your manager for the answer every single time you come up against a question, are they doing the job for you or are you doing the job? I think in that example that we just talked about, where maybe you didn't make the right decision, but there was a reason why you made the decision that you made, that comes off a lot stronger in a candidate than someone who's just going to say, well, I guess if I don't know something, I would just ask you what to do. There's definitely a level of collaboration and times where you want to have a good conversation with your manager about the best path forward. But what a manager really wants to see in an employee is someone who's able to make their own decisions and someone who's able to come to the table with different options versus just sticking their hand out and asking for, please tell me what to do. You hear stories about people interviewing at these big companies, whether it's a Google or a Meta, where the interviewer might ask a crazy question like, how many quarters can fill up this room? There really isn't a perfect answer or a right answer necessarily, but they want to see how you think and how you problem solve. At the end of the day, the answer isn't important unless it's a really crappy answer. Like, say, for that particular question, if your answer is 5 quarters, I'm probably going to end the interview right there. If your answer was 10,000 quarters or 100,000 quarters, I mean, honestly, I have no idea. But what I'm more interested in is understanding why you got to 10,000 or 100,000 when you provided that answer. Going back to the point about sometimes being okay with weaknesses and not having the answer to every single thing, there are times where the answer of, I would Google it, or I would use X reputable source to find the answer, I think is a perfectly fine answer. Maybe it's trauma from our English teacher telling us that we can't use Wikipedia as a source in one of our essays. Resources like Google, Stack Overflow, or some other type of reputable source are perfectly fine tools to use in your everyday job. Honestly, ask any doctors that you know how many times they have to Google or look up something. You might be surprised to find the answer. It's not a doctor's job to know the answer to every single thing, but rather the doctor's job to take a look at the different types of information that's out there and use their training and their knowledge to help determine what of that information they need to use, what's relevant, and how that information comes together. Similarly, when you're interviewing, I'm more interested to find someone who has initiative, someone who's curious, someone who's going to help find the answer or seek out the answer, than someone who pretends like they know everything and never needs to do that, because it's those people who are going to get you in the most trouble because they think they know everything. 7, and lastly, make sure you ask good questions. And I'm not just talking about at the end of the interview when they ask, do you have any questions for me? An interview should be more like a dinner conversation, more so than a one-way street. As you provide your answer, feel free to weave in some questions as well. Show that you genuinely care and are interested in not just the job or the company, but the person that you're talking to and the people that you might be working with. Don't ask questions just because you're supposed to, but because you're genuinely curious. Try to think about things that you might want to know. If you answer a question about what your daily responsibilities look like, you can follow that up with, what are some of the daily responsibilities that you have? Or what are some of the responsibilities that I might have? It's really obvious someone who's just asking questions because they are supposed to, someone who's reading off a list of questions. But if you think about it more as a conversation versus a checklist where you say, okay, check, I've asked this question, check, I've gave this example, you don't want to come off, like I said, like a robot. Also, just because you ask questions doesn't necessarily mean that you're just trying to get information by asking that, but you can also show and display some knowledge by asking really good questions. Thinking about some of the examples that we talked about before with the Macy's and the Nordstrom, if you can weave some of that into your questions throughout the interview, it shows that you're smart, you're intelligent, someone who does research, someone who's curious, that hits all those different marks. And tying this all together, by doing that research before the interview begins, you can ask questions that are several layers deep. So a lot of people might say, what are the company's projected earnings for the next year? What are the different directions that the company's headed in? But if you can talk about the industry or even related industries, and bring that into the interview, you're going inception levels deep with your questions. You can talk about how the current economic climate might impact the different spending habits of your customer base and how the company is handling that. Maybe you can talk about how that might potentially impact the company's strategy, their 1, 3, 5-year plan. Or if the company was in the news recently, you can weave some of that in to your answers and your questions to show that you are staying on top of current events. Obviously, if it's a sensitive topic and something that the company would want to talk about, steer clear of that. But we're talking about good things, or maybe it was an earnings report, or maybe it was a recent launch or an acquisition. Those are all primarily good things to bring up in an interview, especially when it comes to asking your questions. The easier you can make your boss's life, the more they're going to appreciate you. Hiring anybody is a huge risk that both the company and that manager needs to take. So in the short time that you have together in the interview, you need to be able to convince them that you're worth taking that risk. You might only have 30 or 60 minutes or maybe even less. So use the best of that time, that short time, to convince this person as well as the company why you're worth that bet. A lot of articles out there that talk about interviewing, including my own video, which I'll link down below, is going to provide a lot of generic and basic level information that's going to help when it comes to the interview process. But these are 7 tips and tricks that I've personally used to get interviews and to get job offers from some of the best companies that I've personally worked with. Hopefully this information was really helpful for you. If so, please leave a like and a comment down below. If you have any questions, please let me know and I'll be happy to answer them in the next one. Be kind.